Most ambitious people rely on their intellect to solve problems. So when faced with a complex decision, the instinct is to sit down and think it through. You map the angles, you run the risks, and spend hours spinning out scenarios. But after 2 hours of what feels like intense mental labor, you aren't any closer to an answer. Instead, you're exhausted, your anxiety is elevated, and the decision itself remains completely unresolved. The brain monitors the intensity of this internal struggle and uses that friction as a proxy for progress. It tracks how much energy you are burning and concludes that you must be getting somewhere. This creates a pattern where the mind equates the sheer repetition of a thought with analytical rigor. It treats the act of rehearsing a scenario for the 10th time as if it were a new layer of thoroughness. That heavily felt sense of effort creates a convincing illusion, but overthinking generates exactly zero new information. To address this, we need to mechanically deconstruct the difference between analyzing a problem and simply rehearsing a worry, and then look at a specific protocol to interrupt a stalled system. Cognitive effort does not equal cognitive output. You are essentially operating a high-performance mental engine at redline with no transmission. It generates a massive amount of heat, but no forward movement. Actual analysis is the process of updating an internal model. You start with a problem and move along a linear path by absorbing new information. It reaches a natural endpoint. But overthinking abandons that track. The path bends backward, rerunning known worries. To keep you engaged, the process attempts to artificially generate newness by merely changing the vocabulary and phrasing of the exact same underlying fears. But because no actual external data is entering the system, the problem structurally cannot move forward. Your brain is trapped in a behavioral algorithm. It mimics the exact cadence of thinking, but strips away all the functional utility. This is a closed mechanical circuit. It is a separate state of operation that shares the vocabulary of analysis, but none of its movement. Here's what's interesting about that. Why would a highly capable mind willingly abandon a productive linear model to sit inside a closed, useless loop? The root catalyst often comes down to the brain's inability to categorize unresolved emotional tension. When you experience lingering emotional ambiguity, fear of a bad outcome, uncertainty about a project, or social friction at work, your cognitive system treats that feeling as a literal open task that demands resolution. Without clear data to close the task, the system forces a junction switch. It diverts processing power away from objective logical analysis. The flow is routed into a threat scanning subroutine, a very old evolutionary mechanism designed to keep you safe in unpredictable environments. Threat scanning does not seek out actual solutions. Its only job is to endlessly rotate through worst-case scenarios, checking and rechecking to ensure no angle of danger is missed. The two modes operate on different rule sets. Analysis seeks an answer, while threat scanning seeks the absolute certainty of safety. And because absolute certainty is impossible to achieve in modern professional dilemmas, the threat scanner can never satisfy its own criteria, so it never shuts itself off. The internal experience of this is a constant low-level hum of vigilance. It drains systemic energy while yielding no actionable data. When you are stuck spinning on a problem, you are no longer attempting to solve it. Your nervous system is simply scanning the perimeter for predators. It is highly frustrating to realize that being intelligent does not protect you from this pattern. There's evidence to suggest that high analytical capability actually makes the looping problem more difficult to escape. A highly capable mind possesses a vast vocabulary and a deep capacity for systemic modeling. The threat scanning subroutine simply co-opts those analytical skills. It uses them to build incredibly detailed, highly articulate worst-case scenarios. The sheer complexity of that internal narrative acts as camouflage. It tricks the individual into believing that because the thoughts are so sophisticated, they must be valid and necessary. High intelligence can trap you inside a flawless simulation of productivity. The smarter you are, the more convincing your own internal loop becomes. In the context of rumination, high intelligence acts as a weaponized capability deployed directly against your own internal state management. When people realize they are stuck, they usually fall back on standard strategies. They argue with their own thoughts, demand perfect certainty before acting, or command themselves to think harder. Those strategies often backfire. One would assume more effort helps, but the evidence on cognitive friction suggests that extra force only deepens the cycle. When you issue a generic instruction to stop thinking about it, that rule must be enforced. The act of enforcement spins up a monitor and check system. Your brain continuously monitors itself, which significantly increases cognitive load and requires massive processing power to sustain. If you try to argue with individual thoughts, you feed new variables back into the same broken algorithm. You end up validating the threat scanner's existence by engaging with it. Eventually, the system locks up. It is paralyzed by the friction of trying to police its own operation. Brute force only tightens the knot. You cannot logic your way out of a system that actively feeds on cognitive friction. The goal of internal state management is never an empty, perfectly silent mind. The true objective is simply breaking the repetitive cycle long enough to allow a single piece of new information to enter the system. Because the loop is self-reinforcing, the interruption has to bypass the cognitive system entirely. You need a definitive external mode shift. That might mean writing down one single, highly specific novel question, or it might mean imposing a hard temporal boundary, telling yourself, I decide at 6 p.m. with what I know now. Since the internal software is caught in a recursive pattern, a shift in physical state offers a circuit break the system cannot provide itself. A practical starting point is the explicit, objective labeling of the mental pattern. Naming the process creates structural distance. It reduces your psychological fusion with the content of the thoughts, no matter how intimidating they seem in the moment. You pair that label with an immediate physical state change. Standing up, walking a short distance, or drinking water slowly forces the brain to reorient its attention away from the threat scan mode. This physical break is a tactical intervention, provided you return to the topic with a defined next step based only on known data. If you take one thing from this, the next time you're spinning, label it once. This is the loop. Then change your body before you think another lap. See if the problem looks the same when you come back.